Hello, everyone. I'm Carol Fleck, and on behalf of the ADDitude team, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's ADHD Experts presentation titled Proactive and Reactive Strategies for Managing Students' Emotional Dysregulation in Class. Leading today's presentation is Dr. Cheryl Chase. Dr. Chase is a licensed clinical psychologist. She specializes in diagnosing and assessing conditions that affect children, adolescents, and young adults, including ADHD, learning disorders, and emotional regulation concerns. She is in private practice in Cleveland, Ohio, and is certified to serve clients across 40 states. For more information about Dr. Chase's work, visit chasingyourpotential.com. Students who lack emotional regulation skills often struggle with impulsivity, angry outbursts, aggression, and more. For many teachers, managing a student's emotional dysregulation in the classroom can be one of the most difficult parts of the job. When a student has trouble controlling their behavior, it can disrupt learning for everyone in class. And in severe cases, it can become a safety issue. In today's webinar, Dr. Chase will share techniques to prevent runaway emotions and explain how to restore a calm learning environment when outbursts do happen. We'd like to begin today's webinar by asking this poll question to the educators in our audience. What most commonly students? Please select your answers and comment in the text box under the video player to tell us more. For answers to common webinar questions about slides, transcripts, and certificates of attendance, click on the FAQ tab of your webinar screen. If you support the work we're doing here at ADDitude to strengthen the ADHD community, we encourage you to visit attitudemag.com/subscribe and sign up for ADDitude magazine. Our annual Success at School issue is out now with all the expert advice you need to help your students thrive. Educators share their most effective strategies to bolster executive function skills, get organized, and smooth school behavior. So sign up for ADDitude magazine today for yourself or to share with a teacher or a loved one who could benefit from greater ADHD understanding. Click the magazine tab on screen to learn more. Finally, the sponsor of this webinar is Ironshore. Ironshore is a pharmaceutical company committed to the development and commercialization of innovative medicines that treat diseases of the central nervous system and meaningfully improve the lives of patients and caregivers. To learn more about a treatment option for people 6 years and older, go to ironshoretreatment.com. This webinar was supported by Ironshore. Ironshore has no influence on speaker selection or webinar content. So without further ado, I'm so pleased to welcome Dr. Cheryl Chase. Thank you so much for joining us today and for leading this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you to our sponsor. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about emotional regulation, or really dysregulation, when our students in the classroom are having a hard time with big feelings. What can we be doing reactively, and what can we be doing moving forward proactively to decrease the likelihood this would happen again? So let's just do a couple of slides on foundational stuff. What is emotional regulation? It's one's ability to manage and respond to their own emotions, to their own emotional experiences, to their own bodily sensations in a balanced and adaptive way. We're talking about awareness of your own emotions and those of others, effectively expressing and communicating emotions, managing the intensity and the duration of the emotion, adjusting emotional responses based on the situation or based on new information. So it may be that you would respond one way if you're at home with your family and another way if you're out at work. Coping in ways that are constructive and not going to make the situation worse. And integrating or balancing various emotions and rational thought to make really good decisions. So again, listening to our anxieties, listening to our sadness, listening to our anger, listening to our happiness. These are our signs, our guideposts, our signals, but they need to be in balance and we need to manage them appropriately. Now, ADHD, as those of you who are familiar with the work that ADDitude does, they've covered this in great detail. The executive functions have a lot to do with regulating our emotions, and ADHD really is about weakness of the executive functions. EF's control include controlling impulses, thinking creatively and flexibly, using our working memory, regulating our emotions. And if we're not doing those things well, it can create even more frustration, even more big feelings that we have to tolerate, and also give us a hard time managing those big feelings when we're feeling them. So I want you to be thinking about proactive and reactive ways of working with kids who are dysregulated. And I'm talking about kids, but really it's anyone. These strategies and principles are the same really across the board. The specific techniques might be a little bit different, but you're following the same principles and strategies. So to be proactive is to get out in front, create or control a situation by causing something to happen rather than responding after it's already happened. So for example, Alex sharpened his pencil before the teacher passed out the test. Or we can respond in a way that's reactive, acting in response to a situation rather than creating or controlling it. So while working on the second page of his test, Alex's pencil became so dull that he had to stop working to go sharpen it. And so ideally, we're getting out in front and being as proactive as we can when it comes to children who struggle with self-regulation. But the reality is that we're not perfect and we're not going to be able to head it off at the pass every time. And so we need to have both proactive and reactive strategies in our toolbox. So in general, what I'm going to be talking about when I talk about proactive is building a supportive classroom environment, implementing preventative measures, and then helping the child develop emotional regulation skills. The reactive approaches are going to be immediate response techniques, de-escalating strategies, and then a post-incident reflection and support after the fact. So let's get into the proactive ones. What are we doing out front? Number one, we want to build a supportive classroom environment, create a classroom atmosphere that promotes emotional stability and resilience. So what does that look like? Modify the physical environment, reduce sensory overload. So is there too much on the walls, too much noise, too much chaos, too much disorganization, too much clutter? Manage noise levels, adjust the lighting. Provide a low stimulation zone. So there may be a way that you can find a corner or a space in your classroom where you can have lower stimulation, so lower lights. Kids can put on headphones if it's too noisy for them. So ways that they can seek out a low stimulation zone. Use flexible seating. So I know the graphic is kind of small, the picture, but you can see there's round tables, there's oblong tables, and there's beanbag chairs as well, or standing desks, sitting on mobility balls. The more flexible seating options that you have, the better for many of our students, because just sitting in a hard desk all day is very challenging for them. Use music in the classroom, and ADDitude has a really nice link there talking about using music in the classroom. Build in time for movement. Increase supervision during unstructured times. When you talk to children and you hear from them when the most challenging parts of the school day are, many of them, particularly with ADHD, will talk about the unstructured times, the time in the hallway, the time at lunch, the time at recess, the times in the bathroom. Those are unstructured and usually less supervised. Get them to be more structured with more supervision if you're having repeated dysregulation events. And then be flexible and adaptable. Obviously, you know, if there's a 3-day weekend coming up or the kids are just getting back from a long break, you may want to adjust your expectations for that day. If it's Halloween, you know, you probably are already naturally making some adjustments in your expectations of the kids that day. And then I've also seen some really helpful ways that parents can communicate with kids where with teachers, where the parents can just send the child in with a little note that says, you know, it's a rainbow day, or it's a warm day, or something like that. That's code for my child might be having a rough time today. We had a health issue at home, or we had, an issue with grandma at home, or whatever these repeated events are, or things that may trigger a dysregulated child to be more prone to a dysregulation event, a way that the teacher can find out from the parent that, hey, today this one might need a little TLC. Set up a cool down spot, so a place the students can regain their composure before returning to the group. Now, as you can see, this is going to be both a proactive and reactive strategy. But ideally, what we would do is get kids to understand that when they're early in the process of about to get dysregulated, I can get myself over to the cool down spot and kind of stop the whole thing from escalating. It's going to be a comfortable, quiet space that would have tools for them, maybe fidgets, things they can play with, things on the wall that remind them to breathe, pleasant images. There can be things that they can smell, like candles that they won't light, or bars of soap that have really pleasant smells. And then you want to set expectations. What are the rules? You can't go there all day, every day. Who can use it, when they can use it, and they need to get permission first, and how long they're allowed to be in there. Set clear expectations and rules that promote respect and safety. As a rule, you just want to be real tight in the classroom in terms of expectations and what you'll tolerate. So post those rules, post those expectations, address bullying promptly. I have to tell you, I'm a clinical psychologist in private practice, and I'm a single mom with 3 of my own offspring. Children will become more dysregulated when they are being teased, made fun of, or bullied. It's not up to us to decide what is teasing or being made fun of or being bullied, because in their minds, if they feel like they're in the one down position, they will often become more dysregulated. And so we know this based on studies that kids with ADHD are on the receiving end of more bullying and more, they're picked on a lot. And so we want to really get that on our radar, that if one child is perpetually being picked on, we don't tolerate that. We just don't put up with that. Create a culture of inclusivity. Everyone is welcome here. Do not bully or tease the students yourself, and avoid sarcasm. In my practice, I will tell you, I have had children who have come in. I had one boy who was given the nickname of Jabba the Hutt by his first grade teacher because he's so slow. I have had a student who was in 3rd grade called up in front of the classroom because his jacket wasn't tucked away in his locker. And so publicly he was called out and told to go back to his locker and put his coat away in front of everyone. And they were all chiding him. And so we have these instances where teachers don't necessarily realize that what they're doing is actually a form of bullying. It's hurtful to the kids, and it can set them up, and it sets up the dynamic that you're not somebody safe I can go to and share my concerns or my thoughts or feelings. You want to use a very matter-of-fact body language and very matter-of-fact tone in your voice. So I had a student say to me once, I can't tell my teacher when I need help. And I said, tell me more about that. And he said, she's going to make this face. And he tilted his head and he made a sad little face. Like, really? Do you really need help with that? And that was his perception, that whenever he asked for help, his teacher would tilt her head and make that really kind of face. And the teacher probably wasn't even aware she was doing it. I knew this teacher from my own experiences. She's a very good teacher, but the student felt that her body language was saying, really, I don't believe you. She thought she was expressing empathy, like, ooh, that must be so hard. But he perceived it differently. So you got to watch your body language. And then foster a growth mindset. Encourage students to view challenges as opportunities for growth. You want to praise effort rather than ability, and teach kids to learn from their mistakes. Failures are actually something that we celebrate because they're learning opportunities. And so Cheryl Chase, I strongly encourage you to look up her stuff, look it up on YouTube, read her books. But it's cute because she talks about around the dinner table at night, saying to your family, who has something they're struggling with right now? And let's hear about it. Who had a failure today? And what did that look like? That's the kind of conversation, not so much like, oh my gosh, you got all A's on your report card. I'm so proud of you. She would say, you look at a report card with all A's and go, wow, I'm so sorry. I've been wasting your time. Let's find something that's really going to challenge you now. And so it's about the effort. You're working so hard. You're trying all the strategies. So I really encourage you to look up Carol Dweck's work. All right, proactive strategy number 2. Implement preventative measures. Identify potential triggers, and then integrate preventative strategies that reduce the likelihood of emotional outbursts. So obviously, we want to just be observing. Regularly observe the students and note patterns related to emotional outbursts. Time of day, activities, who were they interacting with, what did happen just before, what happened after. Take some notes on that, and then share your observations with other teachers this child has or with the parents. Ask the student to self-report, and in a little bit, I'm going to share with you a program that I found on YouTube. And in there are some links, and they have these little surveys that you can give students at the beginning of the year that asks them, hey, what's hard for you? What do you enjoy about school? What helps you calm down when you get upset? So going right to the source and finding out from them, so you are armed with this data already. Be consistent. Maintain consistent classroom procedures, routines, and structures, because kids will feel less anxiety if they know what to expect and they know what's coming. Post those up visually for them to look at. And again, if we're talking about kids with ADHD, posting as much as you can that's helpful information is going to be a key for them. Play out when-then scenarios. So identify common situations that can trigger dysregulation, and then brainstorm with the child and role play. So I had a kiddo I was working with, and she was at a Catholic school, and she was talking about when they go to Mass, and if she has to sit by a certain couple of kids in the classroom, she doesn't like sitting near them in Mass because they talk too much and they move too much. And so we talked about ways that she could advocate for herself to her teacher. We talked about ways that she might be able to move seats in church. We talked about ways that she might be able to quietly say to the child, I don't want to talk right now, or we're in church right now. So she was really struggling with how to advocate for herself and how to play out those scenarios of what can I say without being rude. But I've had the same scenario with kids at assembly. I've had the same scenario with kids at lunch. They don't know how to handle these situations a lot of times. And so playing if-then scenarios, what could you say or what could you do if that happened? And when they're calm, you play it out, you act it out. All right, proactive number 3, develop emotion regulation skills. Obviously, we're going to try to work with the kids to develop these skills on their own. But much like any other skill, you can have a deficit in it, you can have a delay in it, and you have to develop these skills. And so you want to teach and model self-regulations yourself, coping mechanisms yourself, and then eventually have the kids learn to take those over independently. Now, this is going to be a school-wide thing. You want to implement social emotional learning programs, integrate SEL programs that focus on self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, responsible decision-making. So a lot of schools are implementing these types of programs now, and I'm doing a lot of traveling around the country to provide SEL types of trainings for schools. Teach coping strategies. Integrate lessons on mindfulness. Mindfulness is, this is again another link to an ADDitude article about using mindfulness. It's been shown in the research to really, really help kids with ADHD. Stress management and problem solving. I really like box breathing. And so it's not the be all end all, but it's a great foundation. So you teach children, you're going to inhale as if you're trying to smell a beautiful flower. Then you're going to hold. Then you're going to exhale as if you have a candle in front of you, but you don't want to blow out the candle. You just want to make the flame flicker. And then you're going to hold. And you're going to do each of those for a count of 4. So it looks like this. And so it's called box breathing because it's symmetric like that. Inhale for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4. 3 of those can release neurotransmitters that help you calm down and pull yourself back together. And then this last one, incorporate emotional check-ins. So you're going to use tools like mood charts or emotion wheels for students to express their feelings regularly. This really is a thing. There are kids. One of my own offspring was actually one of them, which I was very surprised, being the child of a psychologist, but he wasn't able to distinguish different emotions. He just knew when he felt jacked up, he knew when he felt happy, and he knew when he felt tired and calm. But if he felt jacked up, he wouldn't really be able to distinguish between angry, anxious, a blend of both, hungry, tired, lonely, scared, sad. When he felt jacked up, that's just what we called it, he wasn't really able to distinguish among what feelings he was feeling. And so this mood chart is super helpful because it helps kids get to see that, oh, it's not just I'm jacked up or I'm calm. There's lots of ways of being jacked up and lots of ways of being upset or calm. It raises awareness and improves their ability to communicate. So the mood charts really are helpful. Okay, so those are the proactive strategies that I wanted to cover. Now let's talk about the reactive ones. So once the child is tripped, once something is starting, once you feel the wave building, now what can we do? I want to talk briefly about Dr. Becky Kennedy's airplane analogy. The first time I heard her explain this, first of all, Dr. Becky Kennedy does really cool stuff. I really like her work. But the first time I heard this airplane analogy, I thought, that's so brilliant. So imagine that you're a passenger on an airplane and you're going through some pretty good turbulence. And the pilot comes on the microphone, the comm system. And the pilot can behave in one of three distinct ways. The first way the pilot can come on the comm system is with a very authoritarian and rigid approach, which is, essentially saying, everybody stop. You're being so dramatic. It's just a little turbulence. Knock it off. Get yourselves together. What would happen if I had a fit every time I went through turbulence? Just stop. You guys are being ridiculous. And so it's very invalidating. It's not very helpful. And it leaves you thinking, wow, this pilot is like not in control. And I and us passengers back here have the ability to upset the pilot that much. It's scary. It's scary. The second way the pilot could respond is, oh gosh, guys, it's really scary up here. We have a lot of turbulence. So I'm just going to open the door and can somebody just come up here and handle this? And that would be low power. That would be like the other end of the continuum, just giving up control in the turbulent situation and saying somebody else has to handle this. Maybe even somebody who's a lot less equipped to handle it. And that's very, very scary as well. The third way the pilot can come over is coming over the intercom system and saying, hey, it's turbulent back there. I hear you. I understand that it feels a little bit scary, but I've been through this a bunch of times. So I'm going to go ahead and hang up now, and I'm going to fly the plane, and I'm going to land, and I'll see you guys when we get to our destination. But if you feel that you need to shake, if you feel you need to be nervous, if you feel that you need to yell or scream or cry to the person in the seat next to you, you do what you think you need to do. But I'm going to hold on to my power and control here and fly this plane and get us down safely. And so you validate while also staying connected to your role. That's not so scary. The person who is the passenger says, okay, I've been seen and validated and heard. They understand what I'm going through, and they're gonna manage and handle this. And suddenly, even though the turbulence hasn't stopped, you feel a lot calmer. It's a beautiful analogy for the three different ways that we can approach a child in the midst of a meltdown. We can either start yelling and screaming at them and give them a sense that they've totally ruffled our feathers and that we are no longer in control. We can give up entirely and say, fine, do whatever you want. You're in charge now. Or we can say, I validate and understand what you're going through, and I'm still in charge. And that's what we want. We want you to have that approach. And so when a child's having a hard time, they want to feel attuned to you, and the presence of that, whoever's in charge, can make a huge difference. It says to the kids, even in your difficult moments, I see you. you're worthy, I hear you, and you're valid. The adults around you are trustworthy. The adults around you will stay connected to their jobs, even if you are starting to get out of control. And that sends them a message as they get older and move through life. It's safe to trust other people. And how we respond has a huge impact on the now and on the future. So I find myself in the dating world, and I'm doing a lot of reading and researching and such about sort of adult dating and what it's like to kind of go through it all now as a full-grown adult. And a lot of the theories of attachment and a lot of the work of why couples fail and why dating it can be such a minefield all boils down to your early caregiver attachments and the attunement and the attachment styles that you are used to. And so y'all are setting the stage for whether or not these little humans can go on to have healthy adult relationships. It's so important. It's so important. Okay, so what do we do once they're starting to get revved up? Immediate response techniques. We want to address the emotional dysregulation as it occurs with techniques that are both effective and helpful. And so you want to adjust your position, get down to the kiddo's eye level, and if possible, make eye contact with them. If the population that you're working with or the child that you're thinking about isn't comfortable with eye contact or doesn't make eye contact, still you want to orient your body towards the person to let them know that you're present and available. You don't want to be looking at your phone. You don't want to be looking past them or out the window. Now, some kids that I've worked with, not on the spectrum, but just very anxious, I was able to put my hand up over my eyes so that I was still able to look in their direction and have a conversation with them and engage them. But they were so anxious with the eye contact that it was best if I just eliminated it. Approach with empathy. You want to use a calm and respectful tone, welcoming body language, and you lead with empathy. I can see you're feeling pretty upset right now, or I see something's going on right now. What's up? Stay composed. Above all else, stay composed. Avoid raising your voice. Avoid making threats. Avoid giving lectures. When someone's jacked up, this is the last time to threaten them with punishment. You want to join them and share your calm. You don't want to get them even more upset and jacked up. Redirect. Redirection is always a great place to start. See if you can steer their focus onto a positive or neutral task. I see you're having a hard time. How about we work on this puzzle together? Or let's try go feeding the class pet. Practice active listening. Listen without interrupting. Validate the feelings. You want to use statements like, it sounds like you're really upset, or it makes sense that you feel that way. But I want to be really clear, and this is an often misunderstood aspect of it with the parents I work with as well. Just because you're validating their feelings doesn't mean that you're taking their side or that you are agreeing that what they are telling you is factual. Validating, you're not in a court of law here. If you validate what someone's experiencing, you're not saying to them, yeah, you were the right one and your sister was wrong. If you're validating, you're not saying to them, those are the facts as I saw them too. That's not what it is. What you're saying is, it sounds really tough. Wow, that sounds like it's really frustrating for you. And so you're saying, I believe in your experience of the moment, not the facts. I'm not getting into the facts. I just agree that this is really hard for you right now. And I get it. Reactive strategy number 2, de-escalate. De-escalate tense situations and restore the calm. So offer choice. Provide non-punitive options and offer to assist them with it if you can. So a cool down spot, encourage using the designated area for cool down. And I want to really emphasize here, timeout, cool down spots, stepping away, these are not ever meant to be punishments. They're not meant to be punishments. Timeout was never intended to be a punishment. It is good self-regulation. You step away from the person or the situation that's driving you nuts and you recompose yourself. And so, I've heard many, many times parents went out and about or whatnot say, do you want to go to timeout? Do you want to go to timeout? Oh gosh, Timeout is not meant to be a punishment. Timeout is meant to be good self-regulation. It's meant to be the place that you go to compose yourself and then you rejoin the group. How about a thought parking lot? This is something that I have found really helpful. A piece of paper where the child can doodle or write or draw or put one word that says, this is what I have going on right now. And I'm going to put it here on this piece of paper, and I'll come back to it later when there's a better time. And so I call it a thought parking lot. And so if I have a child who has a lot of anxiety or a child who has a lot of sort of free-floating random thoughts that they feel pressured to share, jot it down, just a word or two, a doodle, a drawing, a picture. And then at the end of the lesson, at the end of the day, at the end of dinner, at the end of whatever the environment is, the situation is, we can go back to that thought parking lot and you can pick one or two things for us to talk about. Go talk to a trusted adult. So identify a supportive teacher or staff member who can offer comfort or a cool down spot. You want to communicate support. Reassure the student, hey, go do what you need to do. Go meet with Mr. Smith down the hall, or go to the cool down spot, or go ahead and put your thoughts down in the thought parking lot. And when you're calm and ready, we really look forward to having you back. And we can talk about it then. So it's not, I'm not talking to you about this right now while you're like this. It's a, hey, go talk to Mr. Smith. We have the plan in place. You know where you need to go and what you need to do. And when you're calm, come on back. We look forward to seeing you then. It's a very different reaction from the child. Provide options. So I saw this online a few weeks ago and I loved it. And I have a group of girlfriends I get together with once a month, and we all agreed we want to do this for each other. When you're going through a tough time, give me 3 choices. Would you like to talk about it? Would you like a distraction from it? Or do you want some space? And as kids get older, I really like this approach for high school students. And so, if they're going through a tough time, it's homecoming season. They got asked to homecoming. They didn't get asked to homecoming. The person I wanted to ask me to homecoming asked my best friend. There's some big feelings, and hey, you want to talk about it? You want me to distract you from it for a little bit, or do you just want me to back off and leave you alone? I think those are 3 really powerful options, and you are free to change your mind. All right, I want to talk a little bit about the term co-regulation. I'm getting more and more requests to talk about this specific topic and do some trainings on it. So co-regulation is a piece of this reactive strategy stuff. It's an interactive process that involves a caring adult providing support and structure to help someone learn how to handle their own emotions. You'll often hear co-regulation called the training wheels for self-regulation. There's a co-regulation in action series that I found on YouTube. It's pretty cool. It's put on by the Administration for Children and Families within the Department of Health and Human Services. There's I think it's a 7-part video series, and there are some things that you can link to with printable things, and it's a nice resource. But they offer a handful of specific strategies I wanted to share. One is they talk about the process of welcoming. So this is a sheet that you print out, like a piece of paper that you print out, and you give it to the students, and it asks them questions at the beginning of the school year about themselves. What calms you down? What upsets you? What do you like to think about when you get upset? So it's just a few different boxes, very open-ended. You can make your own, and it's getting out in front and saying to the child, what upsets you? What calms you down? I want to know these things in case I need to have this information in the classroom. And as you can see, it's a proactive approach. Then a reactive approach is rest and return. And so physically having the child leave that environment, leave that setting, leave that situation, or just put your head down. If you want to disengage for a few moments, you put your head down and then you come back. Take note. So you want the child to stop and scan their body and scroll just like they would through a web page or a social media outlet and ask themselves, what am I feeling? What am I feeling in my tummy? What am I feeling in my shoulders? What am I feeling in my back? Things like that. Stop and take note of what your body is experiencing, because those are signals of your emotional state. Breathe to focus. Just another technique where they talk about taking a series of deep breaths. And then 2-part verbal praise. It's 2 parts because they want you to use the child's name and they give them a specific piece of feedback. Thomas, I love the way you put that backpack in your locker nice and neat. Susan, I love the way that you put your supplies on the shelf quietly and neatly. So using their name and using specific feedback. And then that was classroom related. Now here's a at-home resource, because I know a lot of you were asking about at-home resources. So Gerard Costa developed an acronym of AGILE that provides guidance on what constitutes co-regulation when a child is distressed. And so this information was written for parents, but obviously teachers, it's super relevant as well. The AGILE approach. A, affect. Observe how your tone and facial expressions reflect your emotions. In stressful moments, ensure your affect is warm, supportive, and calming. And guess what, guys? It's really hard to co-regulate if you're not self-regulated. And one of the things that I've learned as a parent, as a professional, is when you're working with a dysregulated child, it seems to trip every unhealed trauma of your own unregulated childhood. So how people interacted with you when you behave that way as a child brings with it very strong feelings. So you may have some work to do. You may have to sort out why it's so hard for you to work with a child because of the way you were worked with as a child. And so it's easy to say, observe your tone and your facial expressions and how they reflect your emotion, and make sure that you're warm, supportive, and calming. But I will tell you, as a mom and as a professional, there have been times I thought, I need a minute. I need a minute. And so I disengage. I go separately. I go off on my own so I can take a little time to gather myself. Now, obviously, in a classroom of 30 kids, you're not going to be able to do that. But that's why Costa writes, for parents. But you will want to do as much as you can to be as on top of your own regulation as you can when you are serving a population of dysregulated folks. Gesture. Be mindful of your facial expressions, your hand movements, your body language, even the rate at which you're speaking, your pacing. These nonverbal cues communicate your feelings and impact the child's experience. And in fact, those get into the kids' reactions and they're responding to the nonverbals a lot faster than they're responding to the verbals. Intonation. Adjust the tone of your voice to convey emotional meaning. Here it is. The tone and pitch of your voice often communicate more and faster than the words that you're saying. Latency. You gotta wait. Allow time for children to process your gestures, process your tone. Co-regulation requires patience. You have to give them time and space to absorb your nonverbal communication. Slowing your pace is a great start, even if you don't know what else to do. Slow your pace. And then E is engagement. Ensure that your child is engaged before proceeding. Pay attention to their facial expressions, their sounds, and body language to confirm their level of engagement. And then the third reactive strategy, follow up after the fact. You want to conduct a reflection session. That's a tough one. Reflection session. So after the incident, set up private time to talk to them about what happened. You want to have a non-judgmental, open tone. Tell me what made you feel so upset. How can I support you when that happens again? You are curious. You're not trying to lead them coercively to a certain outcome. You are legitimately curious. Hey, what's up? What happened? Together, you want to develop a plan. Work with them to create a personalized plan to manage their emotions. And I like to use a thermometer or a speedometer with kids. And so I just did this with my nephew a couple weeks ago. When you're at the lower levels, because nobody really sees thermometers anymore, but the speedometer makes a little more sense. When you're at slower speeds, when you're feeling a little bit upset, what are some things that you can do? I can color a picture. I can doodle. I can walk away. I can take 3 deep breaths. When you're at moderate ranges of getting upset, what can you do? I can excuse myself and go in my bedroom. I can scream into a pillow. I can color really hard with a red crayon. I can go get my favorite toy and squeeze it really tight. And what can you do when you're at the higher levels or the higher rates of anger and speed? I can get a grown up. I can ask for help. I can remove myself from the situation. I can listen to my favorite music. And so I like to help kids understand that this is a continuum. And before it gets too fast or too hot, there are things you can do proactively. And then make more proactive plans. That's the time when they are reflecting back on the time that they weren't their best. You want to schedule regular check-ins, monitor their progress, offer ongoing support, be sure they know what their proactive tools are around them, and then add additional ones if you need to. So that's the time to go back and say, you know what? I know that we have the quiet space in the corner, but it seemed like you weren't comfortable going there because you were really crying and you didn't want your classmates to see you crying so hard. And I get it, because you know what? I wouldn't want my coworkers to see me crying that hard either. So how about next time, maybe we can arrange for you to go down to the nurse, or you can go to Mr. Smith's office or something like that. So this is the time to problem solve additional proactive and reactive tools. All right. In closing, I just want to point you to a couple of additional resources. Guys, Ross Green's work is amazing. He's got a book, Lost at School: Why Our Kids with Behavioral Challenges Are Falling Through the Cracks and How We Can Help Them. Check it out. He's got his Plan B collaborative and proactive solutions approach. Great, great stuff. Talks about being proactive and then things that you can do in the moment. And then Jerome Schultz has a book, Nowhere to Hide: Why Kids with ADHD and LD Hate School and What We Can Do About It. And he talks about some of his approaches as well, with some acronyms and things that you can keep in mind. So those are two great additional tools and resources. Okay, let's open it up. What questions can I help answer?
So much great information and actionable tips, Dr. Chase. Thank you. I also would like to tell the audience that we had Dr. Green, Ross Green, on recently. So that's a great webinar you may want to replay when it's convenient for you. Lots of great tips in there as well. Okay, before we start the Q&A, I'd like to share the final results from today's poll question. We asked teachers, what most commonly triggers emotional dysregulation in your students? 26% said difficulty with academic tasks or feeling overwhelmed by schoolwork. 18% said lack of coping strategies. 16% said transitions between activities. 14% said challenges with authority or behavioral expectations. 13% said peer conflicts or social challenges. 10% said changes in routine or unexpected events. Now to your questions. You did address this, but I'm going to ask again.
Yeah.
As a teacher, I can get emotionally dysregulated by my students' meltdowns. What are some examples of effective ways to not let their high emotions get to me, particularly when I can't step outside and take a breath?
Sure. Yeah, great question. And it's a reality. So the first thing is starting proactively with self-care. And I know, guys, I know self-care is sort of a big, beautiful term and buzzword and all of that. But I can tell you from personal experience, I'm a single mom and I have a busy practice and I'm consulting in schools and I have 3 offspring of my own. You have to get your sleep. You have to eat right. You have to be careful how much caffeine and other toxins or caffeine and toxins you're pumping into your body. So when I made the shift into prioritizing my sleep, prioritizing working out, prioritizing eating healthy and eating on a schedule, and prioritizing minimizing toxins, wow, what a difference. Like I could be present and available for the little humans that needed me. I wasn't just sort of, it was funny. I remember thinking the one day with my youngest, like, not today, buddy, just not today. And then I thought to myself, is there ever going to be a good day for him to be dysregulated? Because clearly it's not today, but it wasn't yesterday and it won't be tomorrow. So the first thing that you need to do is just get I mean this: prioritize your sleep and prioritize self-care. That being said, the old oxygen mask, right? You have to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can assist others. So one of the gentlemen that I listen to all the time, Wayne Dyer, if you know his work, he talks about if you squeeze a lemon, all you're going to get from it is lemon juice. Why? Because that's all it has to give. Well, if you don't engage in self-love and self-care, if you just push yourself and push yourself and push yourself and murder yourself and pump yourself full of toxins and not get your sleep and not prioritize your exercise and just are a stress ball, guess what's going to happen when you're in the presence of a dysregulated child? You have stress to give. But if you give yourself love and patience and respect and kindness and stress management, then when you are in the face of a dysregulated child, you do have that tenderness and softness and patience to give. Okay, so all that being said, other things you can do: deep breaths, change the music, tap in somebody for help depending on how intense it's getting, redirection. The more proactive you can be with a child to avoid it in the first place. But the other thing that I really like is mindful moments throughout the day. And you're doing it for your students, but you're also doing it for you. And so on the hour, every hour, maybe, 3-4 times a day, you're turning on the music or you're turning on a YouTube video or whatever works for you. And you're taking a mindful minute. You're keeping the overall class level manageable in terms of stress. And it's your own moment to kind of reset your meter and self-regulate. The other point I want to give you is I always bring my water everywhere with me. And the reason is because I find that this action buys me a few seconds to get myself back together before I make a response or before I say something. So depending on the age of the folks that you're working with, it may be, a teenager or a middle schooler just pops off and says something really under your skin. Just take a moment, take a sip, and then allow something to come out of your mouth. And so I find that that's helpful as well. It helps me to physically practice the pause between stimulus and response. So I think self-care is critical. I think implementing things in the classroom to be proactive is critical because it'll keep the overall level lower. I think mindful minutes plugged in throughout the day that you do with your students. And I think having a pause, which for me is a deliberate drink of my water between stimulus and response. Those are 4 different things that I can suggest.
Wonderful. Thank you. I love the calming down strategy to keep the whole class, the temperature lower. Sometimes if you have an Apple Watch, it'll tell you to take a minute, take a breath, stand up. It's just that pause. Someone writes, what should we do with middle school students who think it's cool to be dysregulated and that it enhances their self-image?
So that's an interesting question because it implies that having dysregulated meltdowns in front of your peers is somehow rewarding. I've yet to come across a middle schooler who would say, yeah, I have meltdowns in front of my classmates because I get something from it. I increase my social status or I'm cooler because of it. I don't imagine that kids would want to have meltdowns in front of their peers any more than you would want to have a meltdown in front of your coworkers. So I'd be very curious, where is this coming from? I'd be very curious what led to it. Because the dysregulated meltdown, more often than not, is not a choice. I'm trying to think of when it's a choice. But I would want to understand the underlying reasons. I would want to talk to the child about, so when, by definition, a reinforcer is anything that increases the likelihood that that behavior will happen again. And by definition, a punishment is anything that by definition will decrease the likelihood that that would happen again. So there's some reinforcing variable. There's things happening before the meltdown and things happening after the meltdown. And so you want to look at what is happening after the meltdown. Ideally, the child is able to regain composure and rejoin the classroom. If it's some variation of getting attention, I will tell you that if you get a cut on your leg or you sprain your ankle and no one's coming to help you, you're going to yell louder and engage in more activities to get attention because you need help. So attention seeking behavior, I hate that term. I'd rather you be saying connection seeking or help seeking. If a child is attention seeking, it's because they need help with something. So in this situation, I would just go back to, promoting emotional awareness in this child, getting them to understand what their feelings are, getting a better sense of what the precursors are, fostering a supportive environment, giving them a role of leadership in the classroom whenever possible. So Thomas, can you come up here and help me by doing X, Y, or Z? Hey, Thomas, can you do me a huge favor? Run this letter over to another teacher, which, by the way, is a great strategy. If two students are getting into it with each other, or if there's some tension building around a student, give them a job to do that just takes maybe an empty envelope to another teacher, and that teacher knows that you're just buying this kid a few minutes of leadership appearance and a cool down. So having them kind of deliver a letter to another class. And then you want to give the child a safe place to express what they're thinking and feeling and experiencing. So I'd be more inclined to reframe it from it is somehow, rewarded and cool for the kid to it's continuing to go on because we haven't figured out how to get it to stop yet because he doesn't have the tools yet.
Mm-hmm. I love the empty letter. Wow.
Yeah, it's a neat idea. If you have another seasoned veteran teacher in the school, and you two can kind of share that responsibility. So you have, a colored folder or colored envelope, and you and that teacher can just ask particular students to take the folder or the letter over to the other teacher, which is just it's code for a quick timeout, and it makes the child look like a leader, like a responsible person.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Another question, how should teachers explain the student's meltdown to the rest of the class in a way that will preserve his relationships with classmates?
Yeah, I do hear questions like that a lot. I think it's really important to have a full class discussion. Have a full class discussion that's brief and simple, and that's things like, hey, sometimes when we feel upset, we lose our cool. It pretty much happens to all of us. And that's what happened to Thomas yesterday, or, that's what's happening right now. Or what are some things that work for you guys? And I like it, like Ross Green talks about being proactive in even these conversations. And so talking as a group about what do you look like when you lose your cool? How will I know what you'll need when you're losing your cool? So you're normalizing that we're all in this classroom going to go through difficult moments. So you've set a vocabulary, you've understood your students, and you've set the expectation that, we're all going to probably have a day or two that we're not at our best. And so then when a child is having a meltdown, you can say, yeah, remember we talked about that the first week? That's what's happening here with, I keep going, poor Tommy, but that's what's happening here with Tommy. He's having a tough moment. And you can call it something, you can have a euphemism for it, but he's having a tough moment right now. Remember, we talked about this, everybody has them. How can we support Tommy when he's going through this? So we want to encourage empathy. We want to encourage supporting one another when we're going through these tough times. And we want to normalize it, and we want to get the other kids just kind of back to redirecting them to what they're supposed to be doing in the first place. And then just a lot of reassurance to the kids that, yeah, Tommy's having a rough day right now. Hopefully he'll be able to pull himself together and rejoin the classroom because he's got a great sense of humor, or it's really fun when Tommy's in here with us. So you don't want to demonize, you don't want to roll your eyes, but it helps if you set up this sort of, it happens to everybody, and it may happen in the classroom. Like, how would you handle if somebody threw up in the classroom? Yeah, it's unpleasant. Yeah, we don't want it. Yeah, it's not ideal, but it happens. And if it happened to you, we would hope that everybody would respond to you with empathy and warmth and understanding. So I make the comparison to something like that.
Yeah, I love the empathy. And on the flip side of that, we have a question from a parent who says, what should I do when I see a teacher talking to my child or any child in the wrong way, like using sarcasm or rolling their eyes? What's
Right,
a good
right.
way to describe?
So I'm assuming it's a teacher of your child. And I mean, ideally, you got to stand up for your kid, right? You got to be an advocate for your kid, especially our kids who are marginalized in any way, shape, or form. First of all, being children, they're in a low power position, right? But I would encourage you to have a sit down meeting with the teacher and just say, hey, so let's talk about the Jabba the Hutt thing. So I work with the mom to set up a meeting with the teacher that said, I'm sure you probably weren't even thinking twice about it. And I'm sure some children can really roll with nicknames, but my kiddo, the Jabba the Hutt nickname's a tough one. It's a tough one. Now, you want to send both messages at the same time. Number one, it's really not developmentally appropriate to put nicknames on first graders. You got to be careful with what you're doing here. Seventh graders, eighth graders, there's a little bit more teasing and chiding you can get away with, but not all of them. But up until about that age, you don't want to be teasing, chiding, or nicknaming. So on the one hand, you're sending the message that it's not a good idea to do that with kids, but you're also free to say, especially my child, especially my child. And so I would just be very specific. I'm going to ask that you not call my child Jabba the Hutt anymore. I'm going to ask that whatever, and just be very specific. And then if you have to, don't be afraid to look up some articles on ADDitude that talk about ways that kids can be tripped or things that can be hurtful for kids or how to interact with kids. But I would nip it in the bud in a very empathic conversation. Remember, even Ross Greene says, children do well if they can. People do well if they can. Teachers do well if they can. Every teacher that I've ever met is doing as well as they can do right now, given the information that they have. When you provide them with more information, but do it with empathy and understanding, benefit of the doubt, coming at it with, you probably never thought about it this way before, but I'm just going to ask that you consider the fact that nicknames can be hurtful, and calling somebody a name other than their given name can be really hurtful. And I think that's a fair thing to ask of your child's teacher.
Okay. A teacher writes, parents can get defensive or angry when they're called to school due to their child's emotional difficulties and disruptions in class. What's the best way to approach this?
Oh, that's a huge question. Remember, parents do well if they can as well. And a lot of times when we're dealing with parents and children, we are, again, tripping or bringing up in parents things that they've really never resolved or never been able to address themselves. And so I either get a lot of over-identification, which is, oh, I was just like him, or I get a lot of minimizing, like, oh, it's no big deal, or I get a lot of, gaslighting and things like that. So I would say you need to know if the child's on a behavior plan or not. You need to know if they're on an IEP or not. You need to make sure all your ducks in a row first, and that you're following the IEP, you're following the plan as it's written, because I see a lot of times they're not. So make sure that you're following the plan, that it's the way it's written. Then be aware that, like I had a mom I was working with, it took her, she would have to take a day off of work and take the bus to school to talk about the kids' behavior. And it was very expensive and very time consuming. And even when I was teaching at the college level, I had a student who was perpetually late to school because the mom, biological mom, got called into school and he had to stay home for his siblings and get them on the bus. Be aware of the disruption that it creates in the household and know that some of that pushback is because of that. So offer varieties of times or offer to do the meeting virtually if possible. So I'd say be as flexible as you can, but make sure that you have all of your details and data in line and then bring the parent in and just have an open, honest, curious, empathic discussion. Parents are feeling, blamed a lot of times and finger pointed a lot of times. It's the best I got for you. That's a tough spot.
Yeah, that was great advice. Unfortunately, we're out of time. That has to be the last question. But Dr. Chase, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your expertise with our ADHD community. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
And thank you to today's listeners. If you would like to access the event resources, visit ADDitudeMag.com and search podcast 521. The slides and recording are posted a few hours after each live webinar. If you're listening in replay mode, simply click on the episode description. Please know that our full library of ADDitude webinars is available as a podcast. It's called the ADHD Experts Podcast, and it's available on all streaming platforms. We hope to see you again next week for our free webinar on smart money habits for people with ADHD with Otto Rivera, a certified financial planner who also has ADHD. You won't want to miss it. Make sure you don't miss future ADDitude webinars, articles, or research updates by signing up to receive our free email newsletters at ADDitudeMag.com/newsletters. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.